Hello and welcome to the Ilene Silverman Show. I'm your host Ilene, and on this week's program, our guests from the Florida Museum of Natural History discuss their award-winning book, All Things Beautiful, Wonders from the Collections of the Florida Museum. Those integral to this book share their collaborative efforts and find out how you can take home a visit to the museum between the pages of this book. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for our program. I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Beverly Sensbach, Senior Associate Director, Florida Museum of Natural History, and editor of the book, All Things Beautiful, Wonders from the Collections of the Florida Museum of Natural History. And Beverly, it's a pleasure to have you here and to have the opportunity to talk about this extraordinary book and the Florida Museum, a place I hold dear.
Thank you, Ilene. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the book. You're part of our museum family, so it's wonderful to be here with you, particularly.
Well, I cherish that, and I mean, this book is just outstanding.
Thank you.
So, to help us understand how it all began, take us back to the 100th anniversary of the museum and set the stage for us.
Certainly, I'd be glad to. Most people don't know that the museum is the State Museum of Natural History. We've been that since 1917. Okay. So when 2017 was approaching and it was going to be the 100th anniversary of the museum being designated as the State Museum of Natural History, we decided that we were going to do several things to celebrate that. An exhibit was what we had in mind.
Right.
But as we developed the exhibit, we also talked about developing a book about the museum because we didn't have an existing book about the museum's history or about our wonderful collections.
Right, with
So
all your exhibits,
genesis.
you haven't had one about just yourself.
Exactly, exactly. So it was a nice opportunity to do that, and it was a collaborative effort from the very beginning. When we decided to do the exhibit in the book, we asked our curators and collection managers to think about their collections and select a few specimens or objects which were especially meaningful to them. Things that were especially rare, beautiful maybe, fascinating, scientifically important. Things that they thought people would like to know more about.
And that we don't get the chance to see.
Exactly. We have lots and lots of specimens and objects as part of our collections, but we only have a tiny fraction on exhibit at any time. And so this was an opportunity to pick some very special things.
From all those drawers and
Yes.
jars and
Absolutely.
places locked away in Dickinson Hall. And,
Absolutely.
Yes,
And so that's the genesis of the book. We worked with the curators and collection managers to select those objects and specimens and then began the process of developing the exhibit. And then, after that, worked on our book. And it was a great pleasure.
Wow. But there must have been so many choices.
So many choices. Yes, there were, and that was maybe the hardest part of the whole project.
Right, paring it down.
Yes, because we have so many things that are so interesting in so many ways. So selecting the right objects and specimens to illustrate certain themes was very difficult indeed. That was the hardest thing of all.
I would think so, yes. And when you go through the book, there's just the way it's set up and the milestones and the way you understand the museum, but there's just this extraordinary breadth of what you have, plants and animals and cultural materials to recognize those that lived in Florida so many years ago. And I mean, it's just fascinating. I think I had no idea.
Well, and most people don't, and so
Right.
that's one of the things we wanted to do was help bring that story forward to make it more public and to let people know what their state museum has and the types of research we do. So it was a real opportunity to showcase the breadth, the serious breadth and depth of our collections.
And as you said, it is a collaboration.
Yes.
And some of the words one associates with the Florida Museum, biodiversity,
Yes.
working towards understanding climate change, where we're going, where we've been.
Yes.
you're often cutting edge in many ways.
Thank you. I appreciate the fact that you realize that and that other people do too. It's one of the things we're very proud of. Museums used to be considered sort of places where there were dusty drawers of stuff.
Yes.
But
Not
nowadays, the museum, it has a great deal of cutting edge science going on, and we're proud of the work that we do in the field and also the work that we do to make collections more accessible. One of our biggest projects in the past few years has been a project called I Dig Bio.
Yes.
Yes,
Fascinating sounding.
Yeah, it is, and that project is, we're the national leaders in digitizing museum collections and making them accessible online. So we've worked with many institutions to do that, and it's been a great success, and we're very proud of it.
Thank you, Beverly. And we're going to take a quick break, but then we're going to meet all these collaborators that made this special book possible. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking about the Florida Museum's book, All Things Beautiful, and I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Kristen Grace, award-winning resident photographer, Florida Museum. And Kristen, it's also just wonderful to have you join us and talk about the All Things Beautiful book that is just filled with your photographs, and I congratulate you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Eileen, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our book.
Certainly. I mean, page after page, there are so many photographs. Okay, kind of walk us through how this all evolved for
Absolutely. So photographing these objects was just a delightful experience. It was challenging at times, but that's what keeps me on my toes as a photographer, right? It's the challenge of figuring out how we're going to do this. And so, as you and Beverly just spoke, the project kind of began back with our 100th anniversary. So I started taking photographs for the exhibit, and then we talked about a book. And so I would spend, sometimes a week in these various collections that we have at Dickinson Hall. And ask the collections managers to pull out some really amazing things, and I would just spend a lot of time to get my backdrop set up and my lights and photograph the objects.
Everything, they may be very small in real life, very large, but you've given each of them the appreciation that they are due.
Correct.
And we can see all the detail.
Yes.
That's what's fascinating.
And that's what I was going for. I really wanted each object, each specimen to have its own space. I took a lot of inspiration from Joel Sartori, National Geographic photographer, and he, to quote him, said to level the playing field for each of these objects, to give each one its own spot to shine, right? And so, so whether it's the giant mammoth skull versus the tiny little squat lobster, there they are on the page.
Front and center. Yes. And okay, go back to that mammoth.
Yes.
Because there was a special way I could see that you were, piping and draping to get the photograph.
Correct, right, yes. So we couldn't exactly remove the skull from the articulated skeleton there in the Denny Gallery, our iconic mammoth that everyone knows so well.
Exactly.
And so we had to bring in some piping and draping to get a white backdrop. We had our fabrications team. They brought out their lifts, and I was up on a lift, and my lights were on a lift, and so that's how we conducted the photo shoot. It was a team effort, and we were able to achieve the look that I was going for. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. I'm going to go back and find that. Okay, so go tell us more.
Sure, yeah, and then back to the tiny little squat lobster and some of the other objects that we keep in our what we call our wet collections. Those specimens are stored in an ethanol alcohol mixture that will evaporate. I had permission to remove these objects from the jars to photograph them, but I had to work very quickly because the specimens would begin to dry out. So I would get everything in place and visualize what I wanted to see my photograph look like, and then brought the specimen out, quickly took the photo, and put it back in the jar.
This would.
Yes,
you couldn't risk anything.
There were also some other artifacts, like a glass vial, perfume bottle that was found in a well. Because it was preserved in water, it's stored in water in our collections, and so that I only had a minute or two. Otherwise, the glass would shatter for being out of the water too long. So
you really had a lot of parameters to work with. What about the butterfly? There's a special one.
Oh yes, well they're all special.
They're all beautiful and they're all special.
Definitely,
but just this one.
Yes. So Jarrett Daniels and many others in our McGuire Center for Lepidoptera are working very hard to bring some of these species back from the brink, and the Shouse swallowtail is one of them. They were near extinction, and so he's worked very hard to rear them and release them, and it's actually going really well. And so there aren't many live specimens featured in our book, but the Shouse swallowtail caterpillars are one of them. Yes, and
how'd you handle that?
Right. So I had. One of our researchers brought the caterpillars to me, and we handled them very carefully. None were injured, and we put them on the backdrop, and we just kind of let them do their little caterpillar thing. And they lined up perfectly, and I got a great shot. And then we also have the butterflies in the book as well, so you can see what these butterflies look like. But the research that's and the work that's going into saving these butterflies is just incredible.
It is, and it's one of the things that people know the Florida Museum for and appreciate. I mean, as Beverly and I was saying, Florida Museum is a leader in this, definitely, with the McGuire Center. So we go to that beautiful butterfly rainforest, but what's behind that is all of this work and knowledge.
Absolutely, and I think you'll find that in every aspect of the museum, whether you're a researcher, a photographer, the other staff. Our mission is to inspire people to care about life on Earth, and so that's what we do in every corner of our museums. So that's one of the things that this book is featuring for sure.
Well said, Kristen. Thank you for your talent to make this book possible. Also,
thank you so much.
Certainly, and we have much more to come. Stay with us. We're back talking about the Florida Museum book, All Things Beautiful, and I'm delighted to introduce Heather Dewar, independent science and conservation writer. And Heather, it is also a pleasure to have you here and to learn more about your part in this wonderful extraordinary book. And first, congratulations. You aren't a formal part of the Florida Museum, but you are part of the collaborative team that made this book possible. So
yes,
congrats.
It was a great privilege and a great delight to be brought in to work on the text for this book. It's a wonderful team to work with, and I fell in love with the museum the first time I visited there. So when Beverly asked me if I would join the team, I immediately said yes. And the normal, conventional way to do a book like this about a museum would be to write a 30 or 40 page narrative that starts at the beginning and goes through to the end, and then stick it in the front of the book or in the back of the book. But when I saw the beautiful sample layouts that the designer Hollis Woolley had done, I knew that we didn't want to go that way. And so my goal was to try and create a tapestry that weaves together the pictures and the layouts with the stories of these specimens and these cultural objects in a way that's like a museum between the covers of a book.
Yes, you have done that. And it all, as you go through the book and read it, it is a tapestry. And I love the stories. I admire the stories. Some of these scientists, curators I know, and others I just love to see how you wove together, the milestones that are represented in this book. It's beautifully, expressed.
Thank you very much. I realized early on as we were working with these specimens that every one of them has not one story but several stories.
Yes.
There's the story about the creature itself, the living organism, and how it fits into its environment. There's the story of how it's discovered, and then there's the story of what the scientists at the museum learn from it. And their contributions to our understanding of the natural world are immense. They are discovering new species in the museum all the time in those collections.
And it just means so much. And then some that have become extinct, as Christian was saying, they've worked diligently to bring back. It's just, there's just so many different, 40 plus million species. It is a lot.
The research that the scientists contribute is really important, and sometimes they have to go to extraordinary lengths to make the discoveries that they make. Like, for example, you and I were talking about the Komodo dragon.
Exactly. That's a great story.
It is a wonderful story. Walter Offenberg was a curator at the museum, and there was this legendary carnivorous lizard living on an island in Indonesia that was very little known. People didn't really understand anything about it.
Right.
And another museum scientist approached Walter Alfenberg and said, we need to send a graduate student to go study this lizard. And Walter said, graduate student, heck, I'll do it.
With his whole
I'll
family.
take my whole family, yes, his children from the age of a toddler to a 15-year-old,
I mean, I
and
gotta
his
say.
wife. Yes, astonishing, isn't it?
Yes, I was impressed.
They all went to live amongst these man-eating dragons in the middle of
And
nowhere.
survived, yeah.
And survived it. And I interviewed Walter's son, Kurt Alfenberg.
Right.
And I asked him, he was 15 at the time that they went to live on Komodo for a year to study these lizards. I asked him, were you ever in danger? And he said, well, my baby brother was the size of a small pig, and that's what they eat. So yes,
Yes,
we were in danger.
But they still persevered.
They did it.
And you
They
see,
did it.
you gave it the personal touch, Heather. I felt like I was there. I understood it. I was a part of their story. And not being a scientist, I could also understand your text is clear and reaches, I think, everyone on many levels. And I truly, appreciate that.
Thank you. That's what I was striving for. I think people think of the museum as a place of exhibits, but really it's a place where scientists are contributing to the store of knowledge in a way that is especially important now in an age of extinction. Many of these specimens are books of life that tell us things that we may not be able to find out any other way. So I really cherish and respect the work that they do, and I wanted to raise it up so that more people would know about it.
You have accomplished that beautifully.
Thank you very
And
much.
many thanks for sharing.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're talking about the Florida Museum All Things Beautiful book, and I'm pleased to introduce Hollis H. Woolley, Senior Graphic Designer, Florida Museum, and to welcome back photographer Kristen Grace. And so it's wonderful to have you, Hollis, join us because you're an integral part of this wonderful book.
Absolutely, yeah.
From the very beginning.
Yes, this book would not exist without Hollis's brilliant design from the very beginning, as you say. And so she'll tell you in just a moment the detail, the level of detail that goes into putting a book together like this. Not just taking my images and making them look good on the page, but all the things right up to the very last chapter, chapter 10, that looks visually different from the rest of the book. And
Right,
so
we want to hear about that too.
We want Hollis to tell us about her
And
process.
the book is, it starts and leads you forward. Beautifully conceived, Hollis. I congratulate you.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me here.
Certainly.
One of the things we wanted to do is give a little bit of surprise, and so most people don't know about Chapter 10 till they get there.
That's true.
And so what we did was we solarized the beginning of each chapter, and so to kind of give a play on what the photograph is, and you don't really, maybe not quite understand what it is until you flip the page and you see Kristen's photograph. And so the solarized images are to pull you through the book until you get to Chapter 10.
And it is fascinating, okay? And then chapter 10, even more. So explain chapter 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
chapter 10 is, it features a project that the researchers at the museum are working on, and it's a digitization of our specimens. And so oftentimes when specimens need to be photographed, they get destroyed in the process. But this allows us to do a CT scan, 3D imagery that can then be posted online and shared with other researchers. And they can color code it in a really creative way to map out the bone structure and the nervous system and other things that researchers might need to study without destroying the specimen. So there's
Right.
these really beautiful color representations, which then I think Hollis drew from for her weaving the book together with these solarizations.
And I love Hollis in the different intervals where the pages are darker and it kind of draws you to it. And of course, putting together the stories of all these people that have been part of this museum for so many years is just the way you've woven it together.
Thank you. Yes, we didn't want it to be like a solid white book.
Right.
We wanted it to have layers and texture, and we were able to do that. Kristen chose different backgrounds. Some were more of almost like a natural material. We had black, we had the white, and so we wanted it to be something that pulled you through. And also, if you went back and looked at the book, maybe you'd be able to find the one or two black photographs that were your favorite a lot easier.
That's true.
So it was a little bit more of
Breaks it up.
some of a guidance type form for some people, and then also a balancing act for a lot of the photographs.
Oh, this is truly collaborative labor of love. And so, okay, Kristen, how do people get the book so
Yes.
they can enjoy it at home? I mean, it is a keepsake for a family.
Definitely, as Heather once said to me, it's a love letter to the museum, which
It is.
indeed it is, and it's available at the Florida Museum gift shop. It's also available online through the University Press of Florida's website.
Excellent. Okay.
And so, hopefully people will go out, come to the shop, take a look, or order copies for your loved ones.
That's
and
right.
For the
And-
holidays. And,
Yes,
yeah.
they will truly appreciate it, having it in their home. As I said, a treasure. And I want to thank the Toomey Foundation for all they have done. And then, of course, Leonard and Libby Furlow. The memory of Libby is always within our Florida Museum, and they've done so much to make this book possible. We truly thank them because it is a museum family. And I want to thank Beverly Sensbach, and of course her extraordinary work as editor, and the text by Heather Dorr, and you, Hollis, and you, Kristen, and everybody that put this book together. Heart, Soul, Florida Museum.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about it and to also make people aware of this wonderful book that awaits them at the Florida Museum. I thank you all.
Thank you.
And I hope that you will enjoy this wonderful book, All Things Beautiful, Wonders from the Florida Museum of Natural History. Their wonderful collections. I'm so glad that you tuned in, and I hope you'll join us next week. Take care.